So, Andrew, I got another quote for you.
Let's hear it.
Tell me who you think said this. The real world is governed by strength, force, and power.
Stephen Miller.
100%. Yes, that is Stephen Miller.
When I see his speeches, he sounds like someone from a caricature of great power politics.
He is like out of Central Casting.
Yeah.
Isn't he? He's like a mixture of Voldemort and Senator Palpatine.
I mean, my second guess would have been something else from Star Wars, but I figured you wouldn't give me two of those.
Wouldn't give you two of those.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's such a concise statement that reflects so much. I mean, first of all, there's the implication that the real world means that this is just realism. This is how things really operate. And then, of course, he's defining a world where might makes right, and where there is no international order, where there is no international law, or it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. Of course, Trump said, I don't need international law, just follow my own morality. So it's kind of all in the same vein, sort of the downplaying, the deconstruction of international liberal democracy, of the law that makes the world function.
I mean, it reminds me of my early days in international relations, which is eventually why we're sitting here talking about this today, which is, some people think the world is all about power and fighting, and others think the world is all about cooperation.
Yeah.
And then there's a third party called constructivists who said, actually, which world we're in depends on which world we say we're in.
Absolutely.
And that
they
feels
say
like
this because they want to be in that world,
Exactly.
and they're trying to make that a reality. Absolutely. It's not like that is the real world. That's your world.
Right.
And you make it a reality by believing that that is the real world. Absolutely. And I didn't choose this quote at random. I chose this because today we're going to be talking about fascism. We have a great interview coming up. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Political Reality Podcast.
We are Steve and Andrea, and on this episode, we're going to be diving into fascism. What is it? How do you define it? How do you know when you're living in a fascist state? We're going to do all those things.
But first, we're going to spend a little bit of time in the data corner, Steve.
Data corner?
Yes. We could join me in the data heap.
Okay, the pile.
The data pile.
All right, let's go.
We take suggestions on what kind of data container or gathering we're in. So, Steve, here's my data question for you. What percentage of Americans think, and we're in January 2026 right now, what percentage of Americans in public polling say we currently live under a fascist regime?
Oh, I would say 20%.
Well, that's a great guess. I don't know the answer because as far as I can tell, no one is asking about this.
Okay.
Or if they are, it's not in a reputable, national representative
So it's unknown.
So it's unknown, and one of the great difficulties of working with data, there are many joys of working with data, is that a lot of the stuff we care about, there is no data on that thing. So this may change by the time the episode airs, but the closest or most recent data I could find in the ballpark was a study in October 2024. This was a public opinion poll from ABC
That's
News.
forever ago.
Forever ago. Literally decades.
In American politics, that's a lifetime.
None of it, you won't even recognize these names. Let me tell you that. So October 2024 from ABC News and Ipsos, which is a reputable polling agency. And we shouldn't, to quote Nate Silver, we shouldn't hang our head on just one poll. But this is the closest pulse I could find where the question was, do you see Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or both as a fascist?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a different question, though, by the way.
Those are three different questions.
That's a different question than are we living in a fascist state?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So that was not being asked. The question is, do you think that Donald Trump is a fascist? Do you think Kamala Harris is a fascist? 44% of respondents in this survey, and this was a survey of registered voters, so this is not broad population, registered voters, so people who presumably paying attention, 44% said that only Trump of these possibilities is a fascist. 18% said only Harris is a fascist. 5% said both. So does that tell us anything about where we are today? Well, it tells us some people may have seen some of this coming. As we're about to discuss in the show, whether or not you think we're in a fascist regime or we're in a world that looks fascist or not, the verdict isn't settled on this. But at least in October 2024, almost half of respondents to this survey had some red flags around Donald Trump.
Red flags. I think there's a lot of red flags.
I think there's a lot of red flags. A lot of red flags. So we're going to speak with Thomas Pepinsky today. He is a professor of public policy and government at Cornell. He's also a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and he does a lot of fantastic research on democratic backsliding. He's written essays about populism versus fascism and how to think about these different concepts in the context of different countries. His original area of research is around Southeast Asia, but I think that's going to give us a really great perspective, including some other countries. But we are, as is the case with this show, mostly going to be talking about the United States. Let's go to Tom.
Now, Tom, I've been waiting to ask an expert this question. I hope you'll indulge me. It's a simple question, really. Is Donald Trump a fascist?
I don't know the answer to the question of whether or not Donald Trump is a fascist.
Well, the episode's over. All right. Thanks very much.
I suspect that the answer is no. But that's because I don't believe that Donald Trump has any core beliefs about anything. So my general impression of him is that he reacts to stimuli rather than having deep, sort of well thought out plans for what he wants to do. And so I think.
Can I revise my question then?
Yeah.
Is he acting like a fascist?
I think he is.
Okay.
I think what's interesting about him is the way that he surrounds himself with people who act on their own basis instinct. He's got a genius ability to find people who are politically useful or commercially useful for him and encourage them to act like they want. And he seems to have surrounded himself with people who, I can't peer into anybody's soul, but I'm pretty sure that these people are fascists.
And who would some of those people be? Not to name names out of the gate, but let's name some names. Who are you thinking of when you think of these people?
Oh, I think the clearest example is Stephen Miller. This is a man who seems to revel in both the spectacle, the rhetorical style, and the organizational form of fascism. I don't want to make a big deal about whether or not he would have fit in exactly in Italy in 1930. That's not the way to think about it. But does he believe in a society characterized by rigid hierarchies of status and prestige, in which people's abilities to act independently in politics depend on their functional position within society? And is he willing to use force and arms in order to get what he wants? Yes, those things are all true about him.
Oh, it sounds like you're starting to define what fascism means a little bit there, which is obviously what we really want to talk about. I mean, we're using a provocative question, but and I suspect this is going to be a complicated, nuanced, and fuzzy thing. But how is there an operational or a functional definition of what fascism actually is?
Well, so you can answer this question, and I'm sorry to be a professor at you. You can answer this question at least two different ways. And one way is to say, what did fascism refer to when it was first coined as a term? And then the second way to think about it is how is it relevant politically today? So fascism is an Italian word, refers to a bundle of things. There's other words in English that we don't use in polite company that also have the same root word, but it's about bundling of things.
Wait, what are those words? Am I being naive? I'm not going to make you say something horrible, but what's
a 6-letter word for a homosexual person starts with the letter F.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, same root word. And so the notion at the time was it represented a group or a movement within Italy, which is about binding people together around an organic conception of political action and the proper form of the Italian nation state. And this idea carried within it a fundamental conservative perspective on social order. It was really organized itself around the idea of the head of state as a father, right? He's the head of a family, and that people within society occupy distinct positions, and there are some individuals who don't belong in society and can be excluded, and whose rights don't warrant being protected. And it was tied in with the specific social and cultural form of Italy in the 1930s. And so you certainly couldn't say that Stephen Miller is one of those people because he lives in the United States in the 2020s. So that's not the way to think about him. But if you want to take the ingredients of that conceptually, rather than the specific political format that took form then, you could see, as I mentioned, an emphasis on hierarchy, on deference, on submission, on the idea that the head of state is the father, somebody who loves the people, and the obligation that the people have to support the platform of the father, and the idea that there are people within society who are behaving improperly, and their proper status is either to be subordinated or to be eliminated. And I think that is exactly what we hear and exactly what we saw. And when they tried to make sense of the recent killing of that poor man in Minnesota, to argue that he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing and therefore he can be killed, is exactly the sort of fascist way of approaching the politics of dissent.
How does this fit in with, we had an episode a few episodes ago about the various efforts to measure and define democracy around the world and the different forms that it takes. How is this a special flavor of authoritarianism or dictatorship? Is it not really related to democracy versus dictatorship? It's kind of its own thing. Like, how does it fit with kind of the other term? And you've also done a lot of work on populism. I mean, how do we think about where this fits in the scheme of regime type and democratic versus dictatorship?
So fascism is authoritarian. It's a form of, it's a dictator. It's a variety of dictatorship.
Okay.
There's no question in my mind about that. But it's interesting that the thing that makes fascism different from other forms of dictatorship is, in my view, its view of what the role of society is and what the structure of the state ought to be. So it really views the state as embodying the will of the people in some abstract way, which only the fascist leader can understand, or the fascist ideologue can understand. There's lots of forms of authoritarianism that don't require that at all. You could just say, I'm a dictator and you don't get to participate in elections, but you can do whatever you want otherwise.
Right.
You can have sultanistic forms of politics. You can have, communist authoritarianism works sort of differently. The distinctive feature about fascism is the way that it views people as fitting organically within a metaphor of the state as a body with the leader as the head. And, in the same way that a foot can't turn into an arm, like a professor can't turn into a farmer, right? Or like a worker can't be a capitalist. Like everybody has a role to play. And the role of the fascist is to tell you where your position in society is, and your obligation is to fulfill that position. Like if you're the hand, you must do hand things. If you're the fisherman, you must do fisherman things. It has a real flavor of, we're part of an organic corporeal whole, and people. The idea of an individual having rights that are distinct from the collective obligations to one another doesn't exist. That's I think the difference.
I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, but this feels like counter to everything you hear about in terms of what a conservative point of view is. So small government, individual liberties, individual rights. I mean, and this can be about the US, and this can be about Italy, and this can be about any place where this takes hold. I mean, how does one overcome the cognitive dissonance of, I want small government and I want individual liberties, with what you just described?
I mean, you look around in the US right now and you see that the people that I'm talking about, they don't hate the government at all. They hate the way the government didn't do what they wanted under the previous administrations. They may say that they favor small government, but they don't. They want to give as much money as possible to the security forces. They want them to be as large and encompassing as possible. So this is my view of, like, fascism is not being like necessarily about authoritarianism. It is authoritarian, but the essence is repurposing the state for a specific set of ends rather than making it small. So the fascist doesn't believe in a minimal state. The fascist doesn't believe in small government. Fascists aren't libertarians. They're the opposite, right? They believe that the government has a legitimate and constructive role to play, but that role is to ensure that people are behaving the way that they're supposed to within a collective body. And so I think that's why on most of these questions, like the very few true libertarians who exist, in American politics right now have broken pretty decisively with the Trump administration. They can stand behind Trump on certain policies that they like, but when it comes to things like should the government be allowed to assassinate protesters, they actually quite oppose that. The problem is we've learned that the Republican Party contains multitudes, and some of those multitudes include people who really do think you should be allowed to assassinate protesters.
Mm-hmm. So I've tried to, in preparation for this, read many definitions of what fascism is, and every list is a little different. Doesn't seem like there's a solid consensus. I get the feeling like different experts are trying to dig down to what the essence of fascism is, and you could just slice and dice it in so many different ways. So do you have a personal list, or do you think there is
like a checklist?
Items that would be on most people's list as to the features, whether or not it's what fascism is, but this is what fascist states tend to do, or features they tend to have?
Right. Yeah. There's a couple of things that I put on, I think, just about everybody's list. It is at the core is hierarchy rather than liberalism. So it is a fascist rejects the premise that all humans are created equal, and that there are certain people by rid of their inheritance, by their own individual qualities or their excellence, who actually sit atop a pyramid of society, and that there are some people who are their inferiors. I think that's a core aspect of it.
Is that necessarily like hyper-nationalism, or is that just the most likely manifestation of that?
I am unaware of a non-hyper-nationalist version of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do suppose that you could imagine a certain segment of the techno-libertarian, former techno-libertarian, techno-organicist segment in Palo Alto, who actually do believe that they are the masters of the universe, like in a very serious way, that like their own thinking and money is responsible for the future of humanity. Those people do exist,
right?
But
separate from the nation state or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're out there trying to make sure we can colonize the stars and things like this.
I've heard of those people. Yeah.
Yeah, those people exist. But I do think that in like sort of the organized political form, this is almost always coterminous with a Westphalian state, with like a country.
Yeah.
And so you have a German, a Hungarian, a Japanese, a Thai, an American, a British fascist, right? And it's designed to say that there's a people who legitimately need to adopt a particular organization in order to support the interests of the people more broadly. But that people is not all humans. That people is like a set of people.
And it's a very blood and soil nationalism, not an ideal-based nationalism. Not like America is an ideal. It's now you were born here. You have more rights than people who weren't born here.
Yeah, and then always there's there's the hedges and the caveats. Like born here, but like we meant born here if you were a certain type of person born here,
right?
Yeah. And so it's never. It does sort of thrive, I think, on this Schmittian notion of creating the other, of the enemy. There's always an other. It's very helpful for the fascists to say that there's pollutants within society. There's viruses that have to be expelled, and those can be defined genealogically. They can be defined in terms of your politics.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that this can manifest itself. So like this idea that if you were born here from immigrant parents, that you're sort of less American. Or you don't fully deserve rights, or their belief that if you do the wrong thing, you have sacrificed your human rights or your political rights. That's just entirely contrary to the basic clear statements of the founders in this country. And yet that's the argument. The argument that we heard from Kristi Noem, the argument that we've heard from Stephen Miller, the argument that we've heard from others, Donald Trump about 20 minutes ago, that you can't bring a gun to a protest. Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's not true.
Unless you're a conservative.
Right.
Yeah,
unless
Kyle
you're a conservative.
Rittenhouse and others. Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that you could act in a way that abandons your human rights, your civil rights.
And justifies your killing or whatever. Yeah.
That's the sort of thing that a fascist will say. And note what that does. It says that there's a correct way to be a citizen. And if you don't do that, you can be punished, including being murdered. Like that's the idea that if you fail to fulfill your proper role within the society, you have abandoned. Your rights are only rights insofar as they are relative to the whole rather than to you as an individual.
Well, and we were just speaking about this on the immigration episode about the narrative after Renee Good's murder versus Alex Pretty's, and a very quick move on the part of those justifying her murder was, well, she's a member of this community and she was doing this and acting this way. Yeah. And so to play on either character or identity or something like that to sort of justify this.
Absolutely. And implicitly that's saying, well, if you don't do those things, then maybe you are a member of the of the political community. But yeah, the fascist revels in identifying enemies. And like I said, sometimes the enemies are according to your ancestry or your heritage. And sometimes it's based on what you do. And so it's when you look at other fascist regimes, such as Nazi Germany, like they used all these tools, right? They would indeed take all the Jews, all the Roma, and they would label them as vermin, a pestilence to be expelled, to be cleaned. And then they would also identify wrong thinkers who also polluted society in the same way with the ideas of vermin, which, by analogy, they are themselves then vermin if they hold those ideas.
Is this consistent with the, Ian is reminding us that we were talking about the Umberto Eco checklist for fascism, the Or-Fascism, where you have enemies who are at the same time too strong and too weak. So they're deplorable and they're terrible and they need to be exterminated, but they're also somehow a huge threat, but they're also somehow weak and terrible, and it's just very inconsistent.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a process of creating that opposition, right? You need the opposition, you need your enemy to be defeatable, but it also has to be menacing.
Right. I mean, so, I've watched enough action movies to know that that's exactly what you need. But right. So that was one, I think, from our checklist.
Yeah. Anything else? So, like very on many checklists is hyper-militarism, a sort of a cult of strength. And I think we're seeing that in spades. I mean, coming from the Trump administration, this sort of machismo aspect of all of this.
Yes, it's a very spectacular, in the sense of making a spectacle, version of militarism. So that what matters is not your ability to defeat the enemy on the battlefield. What matters is actually the ability to look like a soldier, like and to do poor form chin-ups on television, like Secretary Hegseth likes to do, or to show that you can grind like an operator. Like it's very much about the sort of mass media spectacle. And so the role of the military in this is kind of like the right hand of the leader. Like the military is to enact the leader's will rather than to fulfill its obligations to the Constitution. The obligations are to the order rather than to the principles. And so you definitely get the sense that they like to dress up like operators. I mean, look at Greg Bovino's comical outfits that he would put on, right? He wants, like, it's all about the visual spectacle of this.
And the big speeches to the military and things like that.
Yeah, military parades, things like this. It's the signs, the showing of strength. It's not just militaristic. It's very sort of like traditionally masculine in orientation. It's like let me show you a man doing man things, rather than like the other way to think about a strong military is that the military is everybody, and that a citizen army is one in which anybody can do any of these roles. What they want to do is they want specialists in violence, people who look the part. And who can convey the visual imagery of excellence, and actually their ability to perform on the battlefield is actually irrelevant.
So it's kind of like the heavy recruiting for ICE, the promise of the prestige that comes with being a part of ICE, marching around in your outfits, and less about actually behaving properly.
Yeah, or being able to do a sit-up, which apparently they had to. In point of fact, they cannot implement these recruiting terms because the people who are attracted by these things on average can't complete sit-ups or do or like run a mile. So yes, it's exactly like, let me show you the visual connotations of military masculinity. And if that can't mean you stand there without your shirt on looking like a chiseled hunk of granite, it can be, well, we're going to put as much gear on you as possible. so that you're like you're an Alien versus Predator or something like that.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, I have my list in front of me. But what else would you have on your list of common features of fascism?
I think a common feature of fascism is a kind of traditional morality. That there's, in historical context, and often gets fused with the church. So the church is, historically, it's often been associated particularly with the Catholic Church, as a example of another social institution that takes the organizational form that they're looking for, in which there's a head. There are, the head can make commands to those that are subordinate to it, and others have to play specific roles within that structure. It also comes around like this belief that there is a higher purpose beyond the living one's life independently and successfully. That like your mission is actually to serve like a transcendent notion of the people rather than the people who are actually around you. And that also fuses very well with religious iconography, and a sort of a view of there being a kind of religion, a religious fervor that unites people. And then the other thing that I'd say successful fascist movements have is they are very organizational. So they really thrive on bringing people together to act on fascist things in public. They want people to march together. They want people to put on clothes that look like fascist clothes. They want people to stand in groups, right? You are not an individual. You are a member of something. It's the stormtrooper look rather than, so the stormtroopers, characteristic features, you cannot tell any of them apart. They're all the same.
Right.
Right. But you can tell immediately who they are because they wear a very distinct uniform.
Right.
Contrast that with the Rebel Alliance, and I don't care that much about Star Trek or Star Wars, but what I'm saying. Sorry. I don't care that much about Star Wars, but the distinct features, they all dress differently. They all look different, right? They're all like you're an individual who flourishes rather than a cog in a machine.
Right.
So I think that the notion of organized compulsory participation in the symbolism of fascism is part of what makes fascists strong. It was very, very upsetting to Donald Trump that nobody came to his fascism party, right, for his birthday last year.
Right.
Like it was really, really upsetting to him.
This was the military parade that he had.
Yeah.
And all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you didn't have people marching in lockstep. The soldiers didn't look the way that he wanted them to.
Yeah, they were strolling down the street. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the people didn't look like they were supposed to. What he's looking for is something closer to like the Greg Bavino aesthetic.
Right. Where
you've got somebody who's in an outfit in a uniform, and hopefully other people will look like that. And but like really the point is like to visibly, publicly, collectively represent that sort of stuff. And there's just watch Triumph of the Will. I mean, the old Lenin Riefenstahl propaganda film about the rise of Nazi Germany. And it's the perfect illustration of this. We are all publicly demonstrating that we're cogs in the machine. And here's the machine.
I mean, we saw clues for this in Trump 1.0, where he would go to North Korea and clearly admire the military parades and the sorts of things that we would see in other dictatorship countries. I want to ask your views and your research and others' research on what gives rise to this. But before we do that, is there anything else for our checklist that you want to?
Nothing jumps to mind. It's not like I don't have a strong view of like, these are the things that are required to be fascist. But I think we've put together a nice list of the tendencies, like the typical things that fascists, either in point of fact as they rule or in aspiration as they plan.
Right.
This is what they try to do.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's not an ironclad definition. It is more of a continuum, and like these are the features that we tend to see. And if you have enough of them, you're probably a fascist. Which, of course, people want the binary. Either you're 100% a fascist or you're not. It's all hyperbole. And again, the label itself, while it's useful for communication purposes, whether you earn the label or not doesn't change all the details, right? I mean, all these things are still present and still bad, whether or not somebody some person thinks they add up to the fascist label or not.
Right. Or whether or not they think of themselves as a fascist.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't matter what you think you are or what I think they are. It matters solely what they do.
Right.
And you could think about them as like a bunch of family resemblance categories that could all come together to amount to something which is fascist. But you subtract the Catholic Church and add some sort of Protestant church,
right,
or Shintoism, you can get fascism that way.
Right.
They're not exactly the same.
Well, that was another question I had as we talked about this, is like Stephen Miller, my sense is that those who are accused of being fascist vehemently deny and dismiss that accusation. And why? Why not just own it and say, yeah, I love the pomp and circumstance and the collective and the hierarchy and the, like, why deny it? It's just because it has a bad connotation?
I think in the United States, people deny it because fascism is just unpopular in this country.
Okay.
Like it's enough of a dirty word.
Okay.
I do think that you get some people who do quite embrace this. There's always been the case. I mean, you guys can remember Blues Brothers. There's a whole not like American Nazi subplot in Blues Brothers. Like some
I
people
hate Illinois
like to dress up
Nazis.
and act like Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
So where does this come from? And so my instinct is to go towards your research on populism, which I know you've done quite a bit about, and a lot of really interesting work in Southeast Asia. Is populism a key ingredient for fascism, or are they two terms that I'm just using because I read the news?
Yeah,
Not to brag.
I take fascism and populism to be distinct.
Okay.
Although there's a couple of things that they share.
Okay.
So the sort of binary thinking of there's good people versus bad people, very characteristic of populism as well.
Okay.
The notion that like the leader embodies the will of the collective also, I think, is really quite powerful as well. And I think one of the problems is that we sort of lack a good vocabulary to distinguish between when some far right actor is being a populist versus being a fascist. And so what I look for, and this isn't gospel, this is just something that I happen to think myself, and I've tried to work this over in my mind, is what do they think the organization of society should be? Because a real populist, as I understand it, really doesn't want the state to tell you what to do either. It just wants not these guys to tell you what to do, right? Let's replace unaccountable elites and polluting vermin and outsiders here. And then what we're going to do once we purge ourselves of these influences, people can live how they want. It won't matter, right? Because we're all the people, right? And the people have individual and collective voice. That to me is more characteristically populist than fascist. When the fascists say, we're going to replace these people with a new form of social order in which we're going to tell you what to do, and we're going to tell you where to stand, and we're going to tell you what to believe, and we're going to tell you how to dress, that is the sort of difference there. So it's about the relationship between individuals and the broader social collective that they find themselves in. To be clear, I've never seen anything like fascism in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Populism, there's lots of examples here. The kind of fascist, and I'm sure there's individual fascists in Southeast Asia, but when I think about the sort of behavior that we see from Stephen Miller and other fellow travelers within the Trump administration, I think we're seeing something a little bit different.
Okay. I mean, is populism always a right-wing phenomenon? Because I feel like I hear about it with Brazil and the rise of populism around in leadership. So no.
I think there's definitely a left populism. And in fact, some of the early theorists, or the more recent theorists of populism have been theorists of what a left populism could look like, right? So the idea that what we actually have are an unaccountable set of capitalist elites. And if we purge ourselves of the bad elites who are opposed to the interests of the people, we can reconstruct through popular sovereignty, collective understanding of the way that we're going to organize our economic system or something like this. You can definitely get different flavors of populism on the right or the left. We in the United States often think about right populism because that's the one that is characteristic of the U.S. situation at the moment. But in various ways, you could think of left-leaning populist figures your Bernie Sanders, your Elizabeth Warren, further back in history. I think populism is certainly a vocabulary that a party or an individual on the left could embrace as well. But you want to know what? The populists are not great at doing things except for collectively organizing to move politics in one direction. As soon as you start organizing people repeatedly to join broader social organizations and political parties that are designed to reflect the sort of a broader, more coherent, or like hierarchical organization of society, you're moving away from populism, something which is verging on fascism. Fascism, though, is like we've been talking about, comes in many different flavors, and ought not be associated with like, is this the same as Italy exactly?
Yes.
Because it need not be exactly that.
Can you have a left-wing fascism?
Well, you've probably heard of horseshoe theory.
Yes.
Have you guys heard of horseshoe
Yes.
theory? The idea that if you go further enough right, you end up on the left. Or if you go further enough left, you end up on the right.
You see like anti-vaxxers kind of in that.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, the Nazi Party was the National Socialist Party, like the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party.
True.
I mean, you could call that a left party pretty easily by focusing on its ideas around unions, its ideas about collective representation of different segments of German society. They clearly saw industrial and agricultural workers as one of their main constituents.
That's right.
And they appealed to them quite a bit. So could there be a left fascism? I suppose so. It would have an awkward relationship with the church or with faith and spirituality more generally. But I wouldn't rule out the ability of somebody to square that circle.
I mean, I'm sort of thinking as you're describing this of some of China's politics over the decades around, definitely awkward relationship with the church, definitely agrarian parts of society are their own segment, and sort of left-ish.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see it like cults. Like, what's a cult? It's the same kind of demarcation problem, definition issue. But one thing I think is important is that it doesn't matter what you believe; it matters how you behave.
Yes.
Right. So the same thing, like fascism, I see it as defined by the behavior, which can serve multiple ideologies. It doesn't really matter what the ideology itself is.
Right. This is why I think that like asking is Trump himself a fascism? A fascist. It sort of misses.
Yeah.
It misses the point of what Trump has allowed to be or encouraged to be built around him. He doesn't have to believe any single thing.
Right.
For the structures that he's putting together to be usable for a fascist.
So it seems to me also populism and fascism tends to revolve around a cult of personality, right? A charismatic leader, if you will. Is there a tendency for populists once they win to kind of devolve into authoritarianism, if not fascism?
Is populism a gateway drug? Is that what you're asking?
Because it seems like populism is a way of get people
amped up about you.
Amped up, but not really a governing philosophy.
I mean, but people were amped about Obama, and I didn't see this. Well, but let's.
There's a little bit of a cult of personality going on there, but it was just different.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the populist, like the real populist, believes in constantly there being like a plebiscite on his or her legitimacy, and so they like a populist. Like Duterte in the Philippines, that could win elections at any time, right? He would not. He actually was that popular. He just had to have an election; he would win. Thaksin Shinawatra, also a populist in Thailand, same sort of deal. Until very recently, I would have said he doesn't. This isn't authoritarian in the minimalist sense because he would win any election he participated in because he was actually that popular. The authoritarian side of things comes in sometimes when populists seek to cement their role or their position in society, and when they no longer trust that the sort of like electoral legitimacy that they have commanded is durable. And the example that I know from my own research is the former president in Indonesia, Joko Widodo, who was certainly a populist on the left primarily. When he came to office in 2014, he ran as an outsider. He wasn't really an outsider, but he certainly wasn't an oligarch, and he wasn't from one of Jakarta's big established families. And he ran, and he won that election freely and fairly. He didn't have to throw the election. He was reelected same way. But once in power, especially the second term, he was involved in the kind of like, well, maybe we need to make sure that the other political parties in the coalition are not making decisions that are contrary to what I want. So maybe we'll pass some laws that allow me to, or we'll adopt some policies that allow me to decide who the head of the opposition parties are. So like that's the sort of stuff that you do that undermines democracy by, basically inserting the states as a position, as having a legitimate position within party politics, which the pluralist liberal democratic model, that can't be the case.
Let's talk a bit about how to keep a democracy from backsliding into either authoritarianism or fascism. Because it seems to me, tell me what you think, but it seems to me like there's two basic approaches. One is institutional, you have laws and guardrails, and the other is there has to be an ideological dedication to democracy. And it seems to me that the institutional solution is failing and that's not adequate. If people...
And I think we hoped it would be adequate.
We hoped it would be more robust than it was, but it seems like if the people themselves are not dedicated to democracy, it's just kind of a handshake anyway.
Right. Well, look, I think for a liberal democracy like the United States, I think continually remains. It remains a democracy. Like a vulnerability is we do rely on our politicians being public-minded. And the founders thought very hard about how to inoculate yourself against this. But they didn't anticipate somebody like President Trump, or at least, or they didn't think about this. The antidote to fascism is pluralism, right? And it really is pluralism, not necessarily as an ideology, but like as a descriptive fact. Like there should be multiple overlapping independent social organizations, your employer, your faith community, your sports team, the bar you go to. These things ought to be different. They ought to be distinct. They ought to have no affiliation whatsoever with the government. And the military has to be conceptualized as not the instrument of the leader, but rather the instrument of the Constitution. And so I think that the US is in a pretty good position as far as these things go. But we have a lot of the ingredients that are needed to inoculate the country against a fascist takeover, but we are not inoculated against fascists existing. I do think that that January 6th exposed a really problematic challenge that we are going to be thinking about for the rest of our lives, which is what do you do when somebody says, I intend to end democracy, and you wish to democratically respond to that? Liberalism in the United States has never thought of itself internally, I don't think, as a fighting creed. But I'll speak personally about my own political preferences and my own view of how politics works. I'm fully opposed to the death penalty, to capital punishment for everything except for sedition. And I think any other country in the world, if you had seen a mass of people march on that Capitol, they would have not fired into the air, and they would have been killed. Anybody who tries to take the Capitol, you can kill them. And I don't say that because I want to see death, but that has to be the definition. And the biggest shock to me in January 6th, beyond the fact that these awful people were doing awful things, and people were trying to steal my vote from me, was that our security forces were not used to end that immediately. So we need, frankly, a conservative, small c, conservative understanding of what the founding values of the Republic are. I think the social coalition that produces this includes universities. It includes the military. It includes sports teams. I think it includes our faith communities. I think it includes our schools. I think it requires us to jointly commit to one another that we have established a liberal democratic polity, and we will die to protect that. And I don't want to do that, but I am incredibly moved by watching protesters in Minneapolis and St. Paul respond by saying, our democracy, our nation's under attack. And I put my body out on the streets to stop it. And the thing that I think has really bothered, to your question about how do you stop fascists, the thing that has really bothered them is that I don't think that they believed that Americans really believed in American values. I think that they honestly thought that Americans were like, well, yeah, you can go ahead and kick out any immigrant and I don't really care. And it turns out that Americans, at least Americans in large cities, quite do believe in American values.
You think that what's happening is waking a sleeping giant to some extent?
Absolutely. When you study politics around the world, you experience living in countries where people have different sets of values. There is nothing more characteristically American than saying, I won't listen to you, and I don't have to.
I felt a strange pride as you said that. It's rare that I feel pride in general, but yeah.
I mean, anybody my age who was paying attention to music at all in the 1990s knows exactly what Rage Against the Machine said, which is "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me." And that I don't raise that as a joke. It's very serious. Yeah. That's an American value that Americans really hold. And I don't say it in those words all the time. And I don't particularly enjoy Rage Against the Machine's music that much. But the idea that nobody gets to tell me what to do and that my ancestors came to this country for the right to not be told what to do, that's an incredibly powerful idea. And this country really believes in it.
So there's still some idea, that binds us together. Yeah.
I mean, so this kind of goes back to something I've been thinking about is sort of where this comes from. I mean, this is where I can't get my head around why this would be, apart from the cult of personality, apart from believing that there are segments of the population that need to be removed because they're a threat for some reason. But why are so many Americans, even in the wake of what happened to Alex Preddy, standing on the side of the government if this is such a core American value? Is it lack of exposure to other viewpoints? Is it kind of bought into the fantasy of fascism as you described? I mean, what gives rise to this in the first place? Because it does sound so un-American to me.
I think this is one of the weaknesses of American liberalism the past half century, is that we've forgotten that liberalism is not just the default. Right? There are fascists out here, and there are authoritarians who live in the United States, and they vote and they have ideas, and there are people who sincerely believe these things, and we've thought that group of people was small, and we thought that the group of people was demobilized, and President Trump realized, I don't know if he did this on purpose or just by accident, he realized that he could exploit that, and that there are people out there who truly believe in these things. It's really hard though to pin them down. It's very few of these clowns want to get on television and say, oh yeah, you can kill a guy if he's got a gun at a protest. Some of them will. Some of our representatives are willing to say that. Some of our electeds, but most of them won't. Most of them, when you put it clearly this way, they don't want to do this. They want to think that there's a way to get around making this a partisan issue. But I think in the point of fact, this is at the moment partisan with the Democrats versus the Republicans, but there are fascists there are people who don't believe in liberal democracy on the American left as well. But look, I don't know if you spend a lot of time on the internet over the past 30 years.
I've been there. I've seen it.
You know what's on there, right? Like,
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
It's not just shit posts. Some of those people believe that stuff.
Yeah.
And there's more of them than we thought. And they have been reading the Turner Diaries and fantasizing about a race war in this country for a very long time. We've been making fun of it since the Blues Brothers, if not before. But those people exist. And the response has got to be to crush them. Right. And we crush them through votes, and we crush them through the force of law. Yeah. And I think it's the Democrats have finally, I think as of a couple hours ago, realized that if the DHS employees execute citizens on camera, they have to be punished. Yeah. Right. And it's not a negotiation that we're willing to do.
Yeah. I think my sense of the last 8 years, 9 years is that there's this complacency about democracy. I certainly grew up, feeling that democracy was the default in America, like the idea that there was any significant anti-democracy movement in America it was
the one thing we would all agree on.
It's the one thing we all agree on,
right?
right? I mean, nobody would stand for we're not going to have elections, whatever. And now, I'm definitely realizing that a lot of people were complacent about it. Not that they're anti-democratic. I mean, some people are, but it's really surprising is the number of people who are just like shruggies. They're just complacent, or they're willing to just look the other way. It's like, why isn't everybody outraged?
Right.
Like the lack of outrage sometimes is outraging.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I desperately feel this as well. Like, why are people not more angry? I think there's two things going on. Some people just don't care. They think either that the world is good enough or bad enough that it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah.
And both. And they may be correct that their lives will be basically the same and it'll probably be okay, and that their actions don't have much of a difference. That's one group of people. And then there's another group of people for whom I think it's just never been real before. Mm-hmm. It's never been consequential. And I think what we see in Minnesota is people being forced to take sides. And when they take sides, it seems to me that there's a lot more people out there saying, get out and leave us alone, than there are people coming together on the streets and saying, come here, come take our
keep telling us what to do and taking people.
It's just really hard to get people to mobilize voluntarily to do that.
This is all reminding me, and Steve, what you described made me think about the clip that's been circulating from Alex Preddy when he read the final rights of the patient at the VA saying something, freedom isn't free. And I think I grew up thinking, yeah, but it's pretty free. Like it's I don't have to do anything. I mean, they're going to go, and I think you're right that we're seeing it. This is probably unfair, but something that's been on my mind this whole time. So you came on my radar originally, your research, through your work understanding public opinion around COVID and sort of differences in attitudes about COVID policies. I've also separately read claims that, well, COVID made us all go insane. And the kind of government crackdown on, and the people in charge telling us to do things we didn't want to do, and then the George Floyd and woke and identity politics, like, yes, Trump was kind of out there in his first term, but then we all lost our minds during COVID, and the government overreach gave rise to January 6th, gave rise to where we're. I mean, did it accelerate us towards this? Is that totally unrelated? I mean, where do you place the roots of what we're seeing today?
I think it's accelerated by COVID, but not caused by COVID.
Okay.
It didn't start there.
Yeah.
I do think that people spent a lot of time by themselves and on their computers and on their phones during COVID in ways that we're only starting to understand how people rotted their brains by just being bored and looking at stuff.
Yep.
I think that's very serious. But these guys were pushing on an open door, right? I was just very surprised that anybody would vote for Donald Trump in 2016. Mm-hmm. It still takes me a long time to really understand what people thought they were doing. And I think that you can understand this as Obama. Maybe people are just straight up racist, but I don't think that explains enough of it. I think it's also a loss of one's feeling of status. And fascism promises you status.
Status as a white person?
Yeah, status is like a place where you belong and deserve to be respected. And it promises to punish people who don't deserve to be there. And so that your status is guaranteed by the fact, or your status is enacted by the fact that you aren't punished for being who you are.
Is this consistent with the also sort of anti-DEI, anti-woke language? I mean, because that was rising 2016 through 2020. Every company had a diversity statement and a policy. I mean, that sounds exactly like someone who thinks they're losing status would say, look at all these people getting status, admissions to colleges that don't deserve it.
100%. And, actually making the world fair and meritocratic would be experienced by white men as a loss of status.
Right.
Because in point of fact, it would be a loss of status. And it's really interesting to see defenses of the earlier order are basically take the form of, I can't remember, there's a Harvard professor who's moved to Florida. He's a professor of, it was a professor of Italian something or other. And he wrote this like defense of, I want there to be legacy preference admission preferences at Harvard. And like, yeah, I can understand why I would want that individually.
Right.
But you can't actually justify that meritocratically unless you believe that certain people have excellence under their skin or born into them. And
which some people do, but that's a harder,
Yeah, but that's
some people do think that. I didn't mean to say some people do have that. Some people think that.
Yeah. I certainly don't have any excellence coursing through my veins. Right.
I don't either. I don't even have excellence on my skin. So
yeah. But yeah, you see how this works. I think you're completely right. Like the panic about woke, the panic about DEI, and the belief that you could get rid of that by just like don't say those words.
Yeah.
And you can recreate some sort of social order. What you've discovered is just a whole bunch of incompetent people are in charge now. And, actually woke was pretty good. It required us to actually give positions to people regardless of what they looked like.
Right.
And I, if I have any piece of advice for those who want to fight for the progressive position, the inclusive position, is to go as hard in favor of woke and DEI as their opponents have gone against it. You should say I'm woke as fuck all the time, right? You should say that because you're saying, I dare you to tell me that's wrong. Explain to me why that's wrong. The problem of, I think the Biden years in particular was that people forgot to stand up for what they believe in. And they thought that you could poll test these things. And leaders don't poll test things. Leaders tell you what they think. And that's what I think the progressive side ought to try to do. Because the other way hasn't worked very well. So try the other.
Right. I mean, this is consistent with something you and I spoke about, I think, on the immigration episode, but, with climate change and vaccines as well, and democracy, like we were just saying, there's this assumption that it's the default is, of course, we're going to follow the science and pay attention to the data. And so why would I have to go out and be extreme about it and loud when that's the default and we'll let the crazy people yell in the corner? It sounds like we did the same thing with woke.
Yeah. And I think you've really put your finger on something important. And I've thought a lot about this, is that the Democrats need to be ideologues for democracy. I mean, the small d Democrats, those who believe in democracy, whatever political party they're from.
Sure.
They need to be ideologues. This is a war of ideas. This is not a war of policy proposals. This is to say, you want to live in a world which is run according to free and fair elections. It'll be better for you. It'll be better for society. It'll protect your children. It'll keep you alive. Right. It's helpful that most Democrats, small d, believe these things to be true. But the idea that we don't have to defend democracy, that we don't have to advocate for it, the idea that people are just pluralists or they're just like inherently liberals, that we were wrong. If we ever thought that was just like the default human condition, that was wrong. This is a political movement, and that has to be supported via politics.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
you can't take it for granted anymore.
Yeah.
Every generation has to fight for it again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a righteous fight. We should be part of it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I've been thinking about my grandfather who served in World War II, how horrified he'd be to be like, why are we even questioning that? What is going on that we fought against this?
How many people have a grandparent or two who caught a bullet at Anzio like I did? Or another grandfather who drove a truck across France and then had to interview German soldiers, right? Yeah. Like, people fought for the rights that we have. And I think another mistake that Democrats make is they apologize because they understand correctly that this is not a perfect story, right? The racism of the American military is undeniable. The things that we have done that sacrifice our actual democratic values, there's no question. And to erase those or to efface those is incorrect. But to offer a positive narrative, we cannot be fighting democratic backsliding. We must be fighting for democratic victory. Like, it has to be a positive, constructive, hopeful vision. And we have to allow ourselves to be angry at the enemy.
Yeah, it's funny how often we now encounter this thing. It's like we defend science while we're pointing out what's wrong with it and what needs to be improved. we have to defend democracy while pointing out how imperfect it is and what needs to be improved, especially historically.
Right.
And that getting that balance correct, doing that simultaneously, because otherwise that see, they hate democracy or whatever. They'll just
They're not
they hate
patriots
America.
and they hate,
It's just, but again, politics is inherently about rhetorical advantage and not reality or facts or logic or any of those things. So it's always frustrating. But hey, if that's your job to be a politician, you have to learn, you have to be a master of this stuff, right? You have to know how to walk that line and live in that nuance in a way that sells politically, because otherwise you're not doing your job and you're letting the other side win.
And I think that's very well said. And I think that what you can sense among like your average American voter right now is an anger at the current administration, but also a real serious and legitimate anger at the opposition, the Democratic Party, for failing to give us the red meat that we're looking for. I want boots on fascists' necks. Like that is, and that's what the American voter can be mobilized by, not a we're all going to get along about this. We're going to say, yeah, we're all going to get along. Rogan, you're in the coalition for sure.
Yeah.
Bovino, you're out.
Yeah.
Like just draw some lines, create the opposition. Just we agree we will fight over tax policies and we will fight over the degree to which we make Social Security private. Those are policy issues. We do that stuff. We can even fight about the character and depth or extent of affirmative action. What we can't fight about is whether or not we're all citizens. Right. There are some people who don't think that we are, and they have to be excluded. Right. We cannot listen to them. They don't believe in democracy, and so they cannot participate.
What advice to sort of wrap up? What advice do you have, if any? I may be putting you on the spot a bit, for folks who are watching this and saying, "I want to defend democracy and fight for democracy, and I want to do something in between." Reposting people, posting stuff on social media and waiting for the election in November. Like, what are other things that people can do to be a part of this coalition, part of defending democracy?
I think you should either run for school board or go to your school board meetings.
School board?
Yeah. One thing, if you want to, my friend Matt Glassman has long said that's if you want to make a difference in American politics, you should run for school board.
Wow.
Nothing has more consequential effects on the lives of people around you. So, and he's right. Like you can make a real difference. That's part of participating in something. If you run for school board, you will either be compelled to learn about people who hold different views than you and make connections with other people, or you won't have a chance. So run for school board, or attend your school board meetings, do something like that. Second thing to do is go find a soup kitchen and volunteer there. Your town has one, almost certainly. It may be affiliated with a faith-based community. In fact, it probably is. Get comfortable with that because you're going to have to be dealing with people of faith. If you're not a person of faith, and I am not, if you're not a person of faith, get used to it because this is how it's going to work. You got to participate in something. And then the third thing to do is I think you've got to stop watching TV news. I think honestly, that is. Cable news is probably the most poisonous thing out there right now because it's just not conducive to mobilization. It tells the truth when the truth is conceptualized as the average of two loud positions, right? You have to read something else. You cannot watch network news for your information. So run for school board. Go work at your food kitchen, the local soup kitchen. I'm very serious about this. And then find something else to read, probably local news. If you can give money to local news, you should do so. If you have the time to do this sort of work, do that. But build community. Like it's about connecting with people. You want to know what you can also do, and this is kind of silly. Go to the Friday evening high school football game in your town, right? Or the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
If it's soccer. If it's hockey, go be with other people in a space and discover that you have lots in common, which is that you love where you live, you root for the people on your side, and you recognize the people who are there with you as all being like you.
Yep.
Right? That's the exact opposite of what the fascist does.
Yeah, that's the polarization issue that we
Exactly.
talked about in a previous episode. I have a couple things to add to that. In terms of like where you get your news from, I usually frame that as get a diverse source of news.
Yeah.
Don't don't just sit in front of one channel all the time and that's your only source of news, or online or wherever it is. The more diverse, the better, and seek out opinions which you disagree with. That's always a good idea. And then the other thing you can do is to start a political podcast. Which I think we've checked that box.
If only there was a hero among us who
check that box, so we're good.
and appear on political podcasts.
Yes. And do interviews on political podcasts. Absolutely.
But absolutely, I mean, and I would just echo the interacting with people in your community. It's just, it cannot be overstated, the importance of it. Even if you're someone like me who lives in New York City where most people are vaguely politically like-minded, you know, you'd be surprised who you find when you are interacting with folks, especially in areas you don't normally spend a lot of time in.
Yeah, we're all busy, right? We all have like complicated lives and we all have things to do. And so we have to deliberately make time to just sit in rooms with people who are not like us and just be attentive to something else. And people who do that tend to be happier.
Yeah.
So it's good for our mental health and it's good for our country at the same time.
Tom, where can people follow your work and keep up with you?
So I have something called a blog, weblog. It's
Weblog?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's weird.
Do you write it with a typewriter?
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been writing on this weblog since 2004, so it's been out there for a while. TomPepinsky.com/blog. You can read that. You can also catch me on Blue Sky at TomPepinsky.com, or you can send me an email at pepinsky@cornell.edu. I no longer participate in X, despite my belief that we should get alternative sources of information, because I think that they should at least try to tell us the truth, and that one is not.
Very well. Well, we'll send folks there. And I've always appreciated your posts over the years. So thank you for joining us and talking with us about all of this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
That was a very interesting interview. I got to ask a lot of questions I've been wanting to ask for a while. But we also want to hear from you guys, right? So we've been getting emails. We've been reading your comments online. And one of the things I love about the social media things, I know there's a lot of negative things about
not
social
to love,
media,
but
we're trying to use it for the good instead of evil. But what I do like, I mean, I've had a blog now for 20 years, podcast obviously 21 years, is that you get to actually interact with people. They get to ask you questions. You can respond to them. You can have a conversation.
We can learn stuff from you.
I learned so much from our audience. So send us your feedback. Tell us how, again, we're just getting started with this show. We're feeling our way through as best we can. Give us your suggestions, your feedback, stuff you want to see. We're thinking of ways to maybe increase the content a little bit. What kind of stuff would you like to see? And, there's always going to be, as we were just discussing this, there's always going to be nuance that we don't get to. And part of how we know we should get to it is that people are responding. Say, hey, they didn't cover this, or you didn't talk about this angle of it. If we think there's enough of it, we'll come back and we'll add it in.
Right. I mean, definitely the idea with the show here is not that we are claiming to be the knowing it all or having the final word on any of this. I mean, this is very much about coming at politics from a skeptical and critical thinking point of view.
Right.
And the first principle, I think, of being skeptical and being a critical thinker is saying, like, we missed this, or we didn't cover this. And
humility is always the beginning of skepticism.
That's right.
So we're
not precious about
we don't have the definitive opinion on anything, but what we do promise is we'll always try to be fact-based.
That's right.
And we will try to be, consistent logic, critical thinking, and we'll try to be as thorough as we can, and then we'll make additions and corrections when necessary. But this all depends on interacting with the audience. So
right.
we need to hear from you guys out there.
And I think another thing that's worth talking about, and we've talked about here and there before, but especially in the context of politics, though this is true in science too, is focusing on the evidence and trying to get to a best understanding of what is the shared reality, what does the world actually look like, what are the actual opportunities and things we could do or not do, and what are those trade-offs, means not necessarily saying there's two sides to a debate and they will be given equal airtime. Mm-hmm. This doesn't mean we have our thumb on a particular side and we think that they're the better one, but it means just like with climate change and just like with vaccines, it's not the case that we're going to say, if a minority of scientists think this and a majority think that, we're not going to give those two sides equal, and the same is true in politics. I will do my very best to, we're going to try to speak to guests that we don't agree with. This isn't about agreeing or disagreeing. This is about getting a diversity of perspectives to understand what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're going to be very conscientious about not doing anything that might be false balance,
right?
Or equal time or whatever. That's not what this is about. We'll call it like we see it. We'll give time to people who deserve it. But we do want to represent a variety of perspectives,
right?
Because otherwise you end up in an echo chamber, and we don't want that to happen, right?
Right. So keep us humble. We're going to keep
keep us honest. Yeah.
Trying to do our best. And yeah, particularly if we're not, I mean, we've only had a few episodes, so it's not like if there's anything we've left out the vast majority of things so far.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Eventually we'll cover all the things and then the show will be done.
And in the meantime, we'll see you next time.